Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Our Wave with Priya. That's me. My name is Priya. I'm the founder and CEO of a startup called Our Wave Hub. And we have Hamza Khan and Bailey Parnell at the Watershed Toronto Plug, which is a co-working space here. Super excited to have you guys. Even more excited about the conversation. I'm just going to flip it to you to sort of introduce yourself and we'll get started. Today's topic is social media disconnecting us from the real world? So just to give you context for anyone listening or viewing, Bailey Parnell is the founder and CEO of her own company called SkillsCamp. Yeah. And she's gonna tell you all about it. And Hamza Khan is the managing director of the Student Life Network.
Yeah.
And he's gonna tell you all about that. So we'll start with Bailey.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad you're doing this and that you're bringing both of us on so early. So my name is still Bailey Parnell, and SkillsCamp is a soft skills training company, but I actually started my career in broadcast journalism and then went over and did social marketing because I liked that form of storytelling better. And I thought that the perfect combination would be doing that for TV. So I did some social marketing with CBC and Bell Media, Much Music, MTV. But as much as I enjoy them, I didn't think that my talents were best used convincing you to watch more Kardashians on E! So I went back to education and spent a lot of my career at Ryerson, building up, actually with Hamza, that's where we met, building models.
No way!
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to Ryerson.
Shoutouts.
Yeah, building models for digital student engagement, sharing those around, by the end, the world, and kind of understanding digital community before it was as big as it is now. Mm-hmm. And then that led me to starting SkillsCamp, which is the soft skills training company. However, the whole other half of my life and my research, and likely what will come up a lot today, is about social media's impact on mental health and how do we get to safe social.
Very cool. Super excited to get into it. Hamza.
Yes. Hey, thank you again for having us.
Side note, Hamza is one of those people that you could just talk to, and Bailey, for hours and hours. So we're going to try and keep this to 1 hour today.
We're going to have to keep it tight for sure.
Like, welcome to our dinners.
This is part one. I hope that we can be recurring guests
on
this podcast.
Totally. Are you kidding me?
This is a
Yes.
long dialogue, and I think there's so many other topics that we're interested in that naturally flow from what we're about to talk to today. Mm-hmm. Very excited to be here. This is a topic that is very, very near and dear to me. For the last 15 years, I've tried to support students making the successful transition from high school through post-secondary all the way to their dream jobs. I'm obsessed. I'm very passionate about student transitions and the pain points and the gain points within that student journey, and essentially just helping to move the needle on youth unemployment and how that's currently manifesting in my life. As you mentioned, I'm the managing director of a company called Student Life Network, which is an online platform which reaches now, I think, just over 2.7 million students.
That's huge.
Of the 3.3 million at any given time in the country.
Wow.
So that's really exciting. I'm an educator at Ryerson University, teaching courses on social media, professional communication, digital marketing. I published a book in 2017 called The Burnout Gamble. I'm a keynote speaker, along with Bailey, TEDx speaker. I was involved in the early days of helping SkillsCamp get off the ground. And that was really exciting, and just a lot going on. And I spend a lot of time thinking about all things social media and just what it's become and where it's going.
Yeah, I'm genuinely interested to sort of pick both of your brains because you live and breathe the space and you research it and you apply it day to day, right? And it's very different from someone who's sort of the type of person that's maybe a step removed from it where they only research it, or do you know what I mean? So that I feel like that aspect of the conversation is what I'm most excited about. I just wanted to sort of kick off the dialogue with you guys both have phenomenal career trajectories, and you're just starting right on this path, and I guess I wanted to know your thoughts on how social media has enabled or encouraged or helped accelerate your personal or professional lives. And it's pretty open-ended. Take it away.
Well, for me, it in a way, it gave me my career because for a long portion of my life, it was my life, personally, professionally, and academically. And Hamza mentioned that we both do a lot of speaking. SkillsCamp is speaking by nature of the service, but also keynote speaking and whatnot. And I always tell this story in the public speaking workshops about how I actually started my career, my speaking career at Ryerson, and grew it through personal branding on social media because of how you would tell the story. And so maybe that first talk would be a group of 5 students at some X workshop, this department putting on this event, and they want you to come talk for 20 minutes.
Yep.
And maybe it was 6 students, but we would capture that. I would put that up on, at that time, it was Twitter was really popular. And you'd put it up there, you'd use the hashtag, and now suddenly it was spreading around Ryerson. Other people were seeing it in other departments, and then I would go speak in a class, and then I would go speak at another department, and keep that narrative going that I am a speaker about. Well, you know, the content changed over the years.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where it started, was using it for personal branding for my own, just what I was actually doing every day.
Yeah.
And now, more than anything, I kind of see my social media. I'm very much me, but it is. I can't deny that it's an inbound marketing tool. I get business from social media, and I also get a lot of media, like inbound press opportunities from social media. So in my head, it's kind of like I have the business of SkillsCamp and the business of Bailey, and social media is a marketing tool to do that.
Right.
So it's definitely helped me a lot.
That's very interesting. What about your experience, Hamza?
It's really interesting to hear Bailey frame it as such, that her start and she owes so much of her success to social media. I was just thinking while she was saying that, I think 100% of my revenue streams right now have either directly or indirectly benefit from social media. I would say that all of my money comes from activities that involve social media.
Wow.
And I think we're lucky that you and I were part of the wave before it even formed. I think back to 2008 when social media was just really taking off. I remember like using Twitter back when it was just text messaging, before it was even an app. I got to see a very unique experience at Sony Music Entertainment, an organization that was struggling to respond to digital disruption. I took those lessons and I went to the University of Toronto, where I was still a student and working. And, I tried to get them to change the way that they were communicating with students, recognizing that I was simultaneously a consumer and a creator, and that I wasn't consuming the things that were being created by the institution, traditional ways of reaching students, posters, flyers, banners, analog advertising. There was something that was happening. And, Bailey and I got a chance to be a part of some initiatives very early on in the evolution of social media as we know it. And we sometimes joke about and call those the golden years. This is before
Twitter.
even for Facebook, when you think about it, before this walled garden formed, where your reach was 100%. You would post something and it would reach 100% of your audience. You didn't have to pay for play and so on and so forth. So,
Right.
Sometimes we share these memories that come up on Facebook about 9-10 years ago, how we used to use it when it first came out, and we just laugh because it used to be like going to work, coming back from work.
It would be like the
status.
Insta story of like this day and age, right? That's what Insta story is for.
Now, one interesting thing is, I think maybe 2 years ago, I decided to take an extended hiatus away from social media. I was just getting a little sick of it. I always oscillate between love and hate of social media. I was going through an intense period of hate, and I broke up with it for a bit. But you know what's really freaky? For the 6 months that I was off, there was a noticeable decline in sales across the board. Less speaking engagements, less book sales, less course access, less requests, and less inbound conversations. And I realized at the end of that not telling my story online was bad for business. So what I had to do is rewire the way that I think about social media and unpack some of the reasons why I dislike it, and really try to understand it for the good that it can do for you as an individual in terms of self-actualization, connection, community, collaboration. And I've made it very simple for myself. It's now about working out loud and doing things and telling people, essentially.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. So just what I'm hearing is that social media for you guys have really helped you in terms of storytelling, personal branding, you like the use of it as a marketing tool that sort of feeds into this larger pipeline of sales, right?
Yeah, I think I'm really glad actually that you're starting with the positive, because I spend a lot of my life talking about the risks of social media and what to be weary of. But in all those conversations, I also have to draw attention to the fact that it can do good and that there are consequences from not being on. So it's about practicing safe social.
Yeah, it's that balance sort of element, right? Just from what I've heard, I guess so. The question is, in a world where like now more than 3.5 billion people are daily active users across platforms,
literally
right?
half.
Yeah, that's like 40-ish, 45% of the global total population. And my question to you guys is, I have a lot of friends that I'm connected through on social media that we don't necessarily see each other all the time, but we're in each other's lives through our social medias. Are people, do you think, more connected or more disconnected from each other because of social media? Like the connectivity side of things, right? Like, and one specific example is this, like, because I watch like 2 or 3 people, let's say, their stories on Insta Story or Instagram stories, and that's sort of my relationship with them, as opposed to me texting or calling or checking up on them. Do you know what I mean? Like that, there's sort of been that evolution of like touch points and check-in points within people. Like, how do you see, in sort of a personal setting, has it connected people, disconnected people? Like, what are your thoughts?
This is dicey. This is a landmine. Let's see how we dance around this.
Well, I think that it's funny because in the research, even though people are saying that they're more connected than ever, people are also reporting being lonelier than ever. Yeah. And I'm someone, I can say I experienced mostly the positive side of social media. And that was actually part of my initial curiosity in social, which was what was happening here that wasn't happening with all my friends and all my students and all that stuff. And so what I like about it is part of that good part being connection to family, connection to friends. And I honestly feel like when I see those friends that I pick up right where we left off, like there's been a continuation along the way. Unlike before where, you know, you're catching up on the last year, but not really, because you can't really remember everything that's happened in a year, and you kind of feel like they're part of your story and you're part of their story. But at the same time, it does not replace offline encounters. It just does not.
That's interesting. Would you say then that social media allows you to deepen your relationships with your existing contacts, but at the same time makes it overwhelming for you to connect with a wide swath of people?
Well, the circle is small.
Right.
Like my friend circle, Hamza knows better than anyone. I think you're actually much better at like building true relationships over social media than I am.
So that's interesting. So I used an app not that long ago, and I think they went under recently. Unfortunately, they were on the brink of becoming a true Toronto and Canada success story. I think they were called Nudge.ai.
Oh,
shout out to Jackson, right?
Jackson Khan.
Jackson Khan, the OG. He put me on to Nudge, and what Nudge does is it connects to different social mediums, and it gives you a score on how deep your relationships and how strong your relationships are based on words that you've used and frequency of touch points and meetings and so on and so forth. And I actually scored very low.
Interesting.
I had a lot of connections, but none of them were very strong. And even earlier this year, Bailey knows that I've been having some meditations on just where I'm at with my friends and am I actually as connected to them as I would like to be. Now, if you just observe me using social media on a weekly basis, you would assume that because I message them and I broadcast my life to them and I send them songs and I send them articles that we have a deep relationship.
Right.
But I actually don't know the intricacies of what's happening in their life because I haven't made the effort, not for lack of trying. I'm just extremely busy and I would say even disorganized. But I haven't had the FaceTime like you described, Bailey.
I mean, it's a hard one actually, because with my family, it's been the best thing. We have a 24/7 chat going with my family at all times on Messenger, and there's a lot of us. I have 5 sisters and 4 parents, so it's quite the chat. But it's hilarious. There's always people there if you need to ask questions, if you want to actually show them, do you like this dress? Like whatever you really need to do. And then when you meet up, that is very much part of just being. And other families say, wow, you all are so close. I talk to my sisters once a month. And so I feel like we might get a little philosophical here, but when social media first came out, it was this thing where we saw it as almost mentally different from our reality. Here's who I am here, here's who I am now. But I think that young people today, it's just me. It's just one being that happens to have, like, there's no...
an expression online.
You say
there's
this
no
a lot
dichotomy.
too. There's no... I'm on me on social media. It's just kind of more and more becoming, this is what a human is.
Right.
There's online presentation, there's in person. That's just what it is.
Yeah. There's a harmony.
Yeah.
It's so interesting you say this. Like, a paradox is that rates of loneliness around the world are increasing.
Yeah.
And I was actually shocked. That was something I wasn't prepared to discover when researching why people are burning out a couple of years ago. I was looking at some meta factors, some factors outside of our control, why, things like competition, alienation, society, technology, and the economy are affecting us.
Yeah.
And then loneliness kept on coming up time and again. Rates of loneliness, in some cases, getting so extreme that, I cite this one all the time. In Japan, you can pay somebody to hug you.
Yeah.
Right?
And there are
that sink
apps
in.
for that now.
Or
or
not even a
websites.
sexual encounter. It's not even in the realm of prostitution. It's just, I need to feel another human being because I've gone so long without feeling a warm, embracing touch from another human being. And that's the reality. I'm not making this up. Like, fact check me, the listeners and the viewers. So how is it possible that, like you said, 3.5 billion people are on social media.
Yeah.
The rates of adoption are growing faster than ever. The proliferation of devices, access to internet. More people are connected, but fewer people are connecting.
Interesting.
That's not my own quote. I saw that on Instagram
Wow.
once, and it just stuck with me.
That was good, man. That was like a gem
Instagram.
right there.
But it's true. I sometimes feel profoundly lonely. It happens, and it's so bizarre because I'm hyper aware that I'm well connected online, but my connections aren't deep.
It's so funny you say that. I'm like disagreeing with you. I've never seen anyone maintain such relationships online.
But I feel like
I
I'm
always joke.
at risk of losing them because the way I see social media is social media allows me to just keep up that relationship until we meet in person. But the gaps between when I meet up with people in person are so long. Like Amir, my best friend, right? I would say last time I saw him was last year. I mean, mind you, last year's only been what? Just
Like
a couple
month.
weeks ago, but the intervals at which I see him, it's not like we pick up the phone now in 2019, 2020. Like maybe you do. I don't. Somebody calls me on the phone. I'm like, what happened? Who
like,
died?
what?
Who died?
Oh yeah.
Just like, why are you
What are you
calling
doing?
I
me
hate
right
it.
now?
Way to insert yourself in my life. Here's what I'm doing right now.
Would you agree with both of us that we're disconnected?
Yeah, it's the reason I asked the question, right? Like I was reading in preparation for this podcast that the numbers are so like inversely proportional to each other because they like you said they're the growth of the market and the growth of adoption at a global scale is only increasing, right? Whether it's on the to the internet or to social media. But the mental health, and we'll get into, Bailey does research around social media and mental health. There's
Loneliness is a part of that.
Yeah, there's a loneliness factor. There's an anxiety and depression factor that comes from the constant comparison on because social media on Instagram, like everyone's only posting when they're doing well, right? You don't see someone when they're like crying in a dark bedroom by themselves trying to figure it out, right?
That's so interesting that you bring that up. I'm actually really fascinated by that aspect of your research, comparison and envy and jealousy, right?
Yeah.
And I've been messing with this idea, which is that on social media, sorry.
I know, it just,
The plural
mediums just seem so
seems more-
natural,
Yeah.
but it's not.
It makes us sound like 200 years old.
But maybe that fits into what I'm about to say next. Like, if the four of us in this room, if we started a new social network, would naturally, intentionally or unintentionally, a hierarchy form? Would we play into comparison with just the four of us over here, even though we know each other, but if we're on social mediums, would there be behavior expressed on the social networks that would make some people feel less than?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I would say yes.
Yeah, I think so too. This is the crux of my research, which is what you both kind of alluded to. But so it's interesting because we were just talking about the fact that social media is causing people to be lonely, whereas I might rephrase it slightly and say that social media can make lonely people really lonely.
Right.
So
Right.
and why
Exacerbates.
and I think so social comparison theory is the idea that people compare themselves as a means of understanding their identity. That's kind of the fundamentals. Those comparisons can be upward. Imagine I'm looking up at someone, deeming them above me.
Yeah.
Can be neutral. I'm judging and I'm deeming us equal ground, or it can be a downward comparison, and that's imagine me looking down on you and seeing you as worse off. And research has tied more so upward, of course, thinking other people are better than you, but has tied all comparisons, even the act of comparison, to a decline in well-being.
Wow.
Yet it is the way that people understand their identity, and that can be as serious as, oh, you're cooler, and kind of more subjective, or it can be very objectively, I know that I'm tall because I look around and most people are shorter, period.
Right.
And that's kind of the comparison in action. And when I first went into my research, I thought that I would actually find a more explicit correlation between time spent on social media and the rising levels of anxiety and depression and loneliness. And what I actually found was no consistency at all.
Really?
Wow.
What I found was that I can show you, or you can read my thesis, but I can show you many studies that found, yep, there's an issue here, there's a correlation, it's bad for mental health. I can also show you studies that said, we can't draw a conclusion here, there's no statistical relevance. And more importantly, I can show you more than a few studies that said social media was improving the well-being of their participants.
Wow.
But where are you seeing a trend with the body of research being built right now?
Yeah.
Because that's very rare. I did not come across any study in preparation for this, and just my teaching and writing and whatnot that supports the idea that, and maybe this is part of the problem, right? I could be in my own bubble, and I could be only seeing what the internet wants me to see, essentially.
That, what you're seeing, and even when I do a quick Google search that's of kind of the main news media, the main headlines,
Sure.
the
ABC,
blogs
NBC.
with the best SEO, it is all bad. And so that's, of course, why I thought that when I went into the actual research and looked at the actual methodology, that it would be all bad. I thought that too.
That's so interesting.
And so then the next natural question is, if there's good, and some people are having good experiences here, and so was I, what makes it good and what makes it bad? And what was always consistent was that when there was a mediator, or what we call a mediating variable in between the two, so I feel envy more, I feel lonely more, I compare myself more, I'm all of this stuff, I'm wasting more time. If that was in the middle of time on social and depression, then it was always a bad situation. And what that suggested was that it wasn't actually time on the networks themselves, it was who you were offline. It was if you were someone who compares yourself often,
pre-existing conditions, essentially.
You are going to go on social media and it's going to be 10 times worse for you.
Yeah.
And if you are feeling lonely, and this really came out in my actual research, not others, my own qualitative interviews, it would kind of sound like this, almost exactly direct quote. It would be like, if I'm home and I'm feeling dusty on a Friday night and I look out and I see everyone together, then I feel like crap. But if I'm good, like if I look good or if I went to the gym that day, then I look and I think, oh, that's fun. And this was overwhelming. It became such a theme in my research because it was like 100% of my participants that said something like that. That said something like, if I went to the gym that day, then I'll see the fitness models and I'll be motivated. Right. But if I didn't, I'm like, get out of my life. Almost direct quote. And so what it was about was their mind state, which is why when I say move towards Safe Social and practice Safe Social and what are the steps, if you take anything away from this podcast, it's to focus on you first so that you can go on there, see your friends and not feel like, why do I feel guilty? This is my friend.
Yeah.
They're my friend in person. We've not had any bad relationships. Why would it be anything other than a
positive
interaction? But we all get in our head, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. My mind is spinning right now.
I know. I was just like, that's so much to take in because what essentially, if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is social media isn't the reason that you feel lonely or anxious or depressed. It sort of showcase or exacerbates
magnifying glass.
Yeah, it magnifies how you already are in real life.
And then it becomes a cycle, right? Because you're feeling down about yourself, you see this fitness model, you feel worse about yourself, you continue this cycle. It's a risky behavior, but we'll get into that.
Can I ask one quick question?
Totally.
Just maybe,
go for it.
Maybe push back on that a little bit. And I hope that the answer is one that will leave us feeling optimistic. But let's assume that I'll just use myself as an example. I practice Safe Social to the nth degree, and I purge all of my social networks of any negative influence. All brands are gone. All people who I find triggering or toxic, so on and so forth, are gone. It's just friends, family, and good vibes. Let's also assume that I also have a ridiculous amount of digital discipline where I can regulate my social media usage, and I practice all the things like looking at my time spent and using orange light.
5 steps towards safe social.
Exactly like your 5 steps towards safe social.
There are just some direct quotes here.
Assuming that I do this to the nth degree, are you saying that there's nothing about the mediums, nothing about the technology themselves that are harmful?
So I'm glad you asked, because when I first started doing these kinds of talks, I first started with 4 steps towards safe social. And that's why in the TED Talk, there's actually 4 steps there. And I eventually added a 5th step, because what naturally people would ask is, well, who's responsible for this? And so here's the preamble. Social media is a risky behavior, like sex, drugs, or alcohol. Social media is a risky behavior. In psychology, we judge a risky behavior as something where when you participate, you expose yourself to potential harm.
Right.
That's it. And so we know for sure now that you expose yourself to potential harm on social media.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's the preamble for the answer, which is I added step 5, which was hold responsible parties accountable. And I say that just like any other risky behavior like alcohol or drugs, it's a multi-pronged approach. And that means that we have a lot of responsible parties. Can governments do more? Yes, absolutely. Governments can do more.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fine, I'll save that one then. Can social media companies do more?
100%,
Absolutely.
we're seeing it right
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Because every distributor of every other risky behavior, we say to them, you have some responsibility.
Yeah.
You can't just get a bunch of people high and think that this is going to be okay. We put
Right.
regulations on them. We make them fund campaigns. We make them fund educational
Like Juul, for
ESAs.
instance, right? The vaping company that had to
We make them
cut
do
all their
quite a bit.
advertising. Yeah. Yeah.
Make them do quite a lot. And we know social media is a risky behavior, but we're not holding these parties accountable. Can parents do more? Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Right now we have a liquor cabinet that's been opened up and we've said drink up.
Yeah.
We have
That's essentially it, isn't it?
Whoa.
can educators do more? Yes, you have a responsibility, just like any other risky behavior. Probably 5 years before safe sex conversations.
Right.
Can we do more? Yes, eventually we need to stop blaming other people for our addiction. Can media do more? Yes. How do we present this behavior? Right now it's kind of like the coolest thing. And there's consequences to that.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of 9-year-olds running around trying to be an influencer.
Yeah.
Not knowing
and
the
7-year-old like millionaires, right?
And for sure.
Which that's probably one of the better ones online is like toy reviews. Anyways, I'm probably ranting now.
No,
not at
this is
all.
good stuff, and I'm revising some of my stances because of this conversation. That's really exciting.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I just wanted to sort of segue into, we started off with like how you use social media and how it's sort of affected your lives personally and professionally. And I want to sort of segue into the whole fake news, data privacy, and boom, Cambridge Analytica conversation. I feel like, I don't know, we live in an age where we're not sure who owns our own data anymore, right? Like there's a ton of data on our patterns and how we run our lives through search engines, through social media. Literally our online presence has some sort of data profile on how we exist, right? And I just have a direct quote here that was, I mean, to sum up the Cambridge Analytica sort of scandal or entire situation in one sentence, here it is. Facebook exposed data on up to 87 million Facebook users to a researcher who worked at Cambridge Analytica, which worked for the Trump campaign. So to you guys, my question is, how do we sort of maintain privacy online? And that sort of ties into authenticity, if I said that correctly, if we aren't the owners of our own data.
This is a big one.
I know. I think that actually this is probably the start of Hamza's next research body.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts about it too.
I put forth an application to pursue a master's because I've been wrestling with a question, which is, can people's opinions actually change through digital discourse, specifically debates? So we all have that one uncle that posts,
Especially if it's fake.
right? Especially if it's
Yeah.
fake. But, I'll give you a really good example of this recently. I have to preface this by saying I love my mom, man. I love my mom to pieces. She's a wise, dumb person. Right? Sorry, Mom, if you're listening to this.
I would say
sorry.
the same.
Let me bring that back. Sorry, that was a little harsh. My mom is a very wise woman, but she's not nearly as media literate. Sorry. That's what I meant. Sorry, Mom. I'm somebody gonna get hurt real bad.
I know you're gonna get the
the Balin's gonna come out, man.
Yeah, come on, Hamza. I'll show you. Sorry.
Okay, but I'll give you an example, right? My mom is so susceptible to fake news. She came back from a trip recently, and she was telling me about this trip, and she's saying that a lot of Chinese people were wearing masks. So at the time of this recording right now, for the listeners, whenever this gets published, coronavirus is in the zeitgeist. People are scared. People are terrified. 20,000 instances around the world, people dying. We've yet to find a cure. This pandemonium. So my mom comes back and she says, there's a lot of people in the airport and on the plane that were wearing masks. And I wanted to say something, and I'm like, if I say something, we're going to get into it. So I'm just like, oh, yeah, okay, interesting, right? And there was a lull in the conversation. My mom's like, look at what I found. And she takes out her WhatsApp, and she shows me the video of the woman eating bat soup. And at this point, like, I'm bubbling up. I'm like, oh, Hamza, don't say anything. Don't say anything. And then my mom's like, look, this is how coronavirus started. And that's when I lost it. I'm like, no, that's absolutely fake news. That's not how it happened. What are you talking about? That happened in 2016. It's not even China. And my mom just sat there like a deer in the headlights being like, no, but this guy sent it to me. He would never lie to me. And I was like, oh, no, like, I don't even know what to do, Mom. Like, I have to undo 50 years of socialization and education, or miseducation in this case.
Yeah.
We have never had more opportunity now to fact check things. Just go on Snopes.com, Mom, and you'll figure this out. Or just Google it and turn off your filters and go on to, maybe not go on Twitter, right? But just don't take these things on face value. And then I realized that there's so many people just like my mom in the world. I would say the overwhelming majority of people in the world are like my mom. They're very, very capable, competent people just going about their daily lives and don't have A, the concept, B, the vocabulary, or C, even the time to be able to fact check and evaluate what is coming into their life. They're just so susceptible to fake news. And to your point, Cambridge Analytica exposed that there are really brilliant people who should be ashamed of themselves because they're using their skills and using their education to manipulate and take advantage and prey upon people just like my mom. And so when we talk about Cambridge Analytica, I get really fired up. And so I'm going to calm down and have a swig of water and turn that over to Bailey.
It's kind of funny. I think that media...
Don't hit me.
I'm just going to cut that clip and send it to Mama Khan.
So I think that... Well, okay, so with the privacy and data thing, it's really interesting when you start talking to Gen Z, Gen Alpha, 2000 and later, because, and even myself to some degree, the way I view data and data privacy compared to Gen X, some of the people I work with, or even some of my family members who are older, is worlds of a difference. And I think that it has to do with people who don't remember life pre 9/11. And part of that is that these young generations have always thought that the government was watching them. It was started as a joke, but it's myself included. I mean, we've always just kind of thought that our online stuff was being monitored.
Right.
And that was being saved somewhere. And maybe because we were so young with social media, that like we didn't even really think about that.
Right.
I had to start doing this kind of work has made me start to think about it in action, but I guess I don't feel as fired up about, like when you talk to different generations, particularly about their biggest issues with online world, data privacy will always come up and security with older generations. With younger generations, like mental health, overwhelmingly. So it's interesting. I think that if you were alive pre 9/11, especially if you're even older, like boomers who were raised by people where privacy was actually threatened in terms of like Cold War type stuff, actually, if you really want to go historically, where your privacy and the idea of your autonomy was threatened, that now it might be like a re-entry of that, a modern re-entry of this idea that that the government is going to try to have too much control in your life, pretty much is I think the worry of a lot of that generation. I'm just kind of like...
No, this is good, right? And you got me, you helped me remember when you talked about how conceptions of privacy have changed over time. There's an article that I'll share, maybe we can put it in the show notes, that details just how privacy has evolved over time, and it's absolutely fascinating. They go all the way back to ancient times. I mean, I was shocked to learn that it was very normal at one point, specifically around the medieval times, where homes didn't have walls, and it was very. It was not even a strange thing that your parents would be getting it on in the bed while everyone is around you.
Oh my God.
That was a thing that happened. And
my God.
we didn't think it was weird, right? We didn't think it was weird. So our understanding of privacy has changed. Maybe that's a bad example. I was just fascinated by that one, so I brought it up. But my point is that, take a survey of this room, right? There's one iPad, one MacBook, at least 4 phones over here, laptops, and we all have Facebook, we all have WhatsApp, we all have Instagram. None of us read the terms of service and agreement. We all said, yes, I want to continue using this app. Yeah. And guess what? They're all listening to us right now, downloading our data. I'm going to say Coca-Cola, 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 and now you're all going to get ads, right?
Oh, God.
But my point is this, and the research has shown time and again, and especially when I do this with my students, I ask them about how important privacy is to them.
Yeah.
And consistently in the last 7 years that I've been teaching, that number has gone down. It's in the single digits now.
Wow.
It is, the last time I checked, only 8% of students that, at least in my small bubble, are very concerned about their privacy.
Pretty good sample size. It's always 150 plus.
Always 150 plus? That's very interesting. And even larger now. And we should talk about that. The wait list is huge. There's a real appetite for students wanting to learn about social media, but not just about how it works, but the larger context. But my point is this. This is the price of admission. Privacy is the price of admission. None of us in this room have paid for our social networks. And if you have, somebody ripped you off, right? Nobody here is paying for WhatsApp. Nobody's paying for Instagram. And what do they say, Bailey? If the product is free, then you are the product.
Wow.
Right? And we're all using this free product, which means that we are the product, that our data is being bought and sold on the market by brands and advertisers and God knows who else. And we saw in the case of Cambridge Analytica how this conversation started, being sold to people who would take advantage of us.
Yeah, I was just going to flip it back to you, but before, just taking a step back and looking at the premise of this whole Cambridge Analytica thing, it was that they used like I think it was an average of like 5,000 data points per person, and the entire premise of the campaign was to sway how they thought, right? And that was in the context of a political campaign. People do that in the context of branding and advertising and selling you products, as you said. And I just wanted to get into sort of the regulation side of things. Like, what it seems like in today's sort of day and age is these social media giants, or even a step back from social media, just these tech giants have like free reign over how and when to use all of the data that they've collected through their service, product, or platform, right? Like who regulates them? What's the role of that people have in this whole equation? I know you alluded to it earlier, but I just wanted to like pull it apart and break it down a little.
Yeah, I say that most of my research is, and like my practical work is about the mental health side of things.
Yeah.
But naturally that ends up tying together with other forms of safety online. And I do think governments can do a lot more. And in fact, in North America, we are very, very behind Europe. And if you're interested in this stuff, to the listeners and viewers, the GDPR in Europe, and Europe's really leading the way in terms of policy around safety online. And I mean everything, including data privacy and safety. And what they've done, is they've said, if you have people in our countries, in our borders, these are our rules. These are our rules about how you can use their data. This is where you cannot sell it. This is what you cannot target kids with this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And you figure it out, Facebook. I don't care. You'll figure out the geolocation. These are our rules, or you're not going to service our people. And I love it too, because then we're putting the power, some of the power, we're giving it back to the governments who we actually expect to who we theoretically vote in to make these decisions for us.
For us, yep.
And or advise them to make these decisions for us.
Right.
And the other thing is, like, we're so behind in other forms of media. We'll talk about how we govern other risky behaviors in a second, but how we govern at least other forms of media here in Toronto, Canada, certainly in Europe and the rest of North America. You cannot go on a kid's TV show and have alcohol ads or cigarette ads. That's been outlawed for a very long time in the media business. And yet that same pharmaceutical company, the same vaping company can go on Facebook and target 13-year-olds.
Through YouTube pre-roll ads and stuff.
That's policy.
Yeah.
That is policy, and that's something that governments can do. And so the companies themselves, I mean, they can do more. I'm constantly in this conversation, even trying to learn more about this myself, about like what should we be advising governments to do.
Right.
And pay attention to these upcoming elections, because some of the networks have taken really hard stands. For example, Twitter has banned political ads. So if you're running for office, you can't actually run advertising on Twitter anymore, which is fascinating, right? I wonder how many other companies are going to follow suit. Facebook said that they are going to allow it, but Facebook
is just questionable sometimes. Instagram is actually kind of leading the well-being side from my angle.
I think so, yeah.
Twitter's taken, I just think it's kind of like,
well, Facebook's aged out, right? Like
you have a backbone. I know Facebook owns Instagram, but Instagram still makes a lot of decisions, and they've put well-being at the forefront of their experience, it seems.
Right.
Small decisions.
I hope so, yeah. It's a terrifying time we live in. It really is. And, you know, and just throughout this conversation, I've been thinking about where we went wrong, right? Let's go back to like the earliest social medium, you know, just oral communication, right? We would just talk around the fire, and we would just exchange guttural sounds and grunts and whatever we were talking about back in the day, right? And then from there, the phonetic alphabet, and then, you know, libraries and publishers, the Gutenberg press, the telegraph, the radio, the television, personal computing, what came after that, the internet and social media. Now we're in the digital era.
Yep.
Where did we go wrong over here? And I can't actually find something, because the things that I find wrong about social media also occur with the internet, also occur with TV, also occur with publications. I mean, lies, misinformation, disinformation, lack of regulation, overcorrections. These have been happening with all mediums, I think.
Well,
maybe there was never a pure time. Maybe I have like a halcyon understanding of what the future was like, what the past was like.
I think there is a major difference in terms of the communications. And what I think that difference is that social media, for the first time in the whole history of communications, put the power back into the hands of
bi-directional,
people to create the story.
Right, consumer creator.
And that had not happened ever before. So you were really seeing one lens of a story being told. Now, one of the first papers I ever wrote in my master's was about the historical elements of influence and how they are hyper-focused on social media, particularly Instagram. And I mean like the things that made people influential hundreds of years ago, and how those elements are playing out online. And there was many. I think I focused in on 7 main ones, and one of them was the interrelational or the familial bond.
Right.
And this is that you are more likely to be influenced by someone, period, the closer you feel to them. You're more likely to be influenced the smaller the group is. So I'm more likely to influence a group of 3 than I am a group of 300. You're more likely to be influenced by me if I create a back and forth. So there was many more as well. And if you look on Instagram or something like that, you have these influencers where even though they might have millions of followers, each interaction is a one-on-one experience.
Right.
And you have them asking questions like, where should I go while I'm staying in Paris? And people are offering something back, feeling like they have this personal connection.
Right.
And so when you're being told by, you know, your mom's friend, or you're being told by this person you feel intimate with, that you should buy this product, it feels like that recommendation from a friend, and you're much more likely to be influenced by that than
weight to
TV.
it, right? Right. There's weight to what they're saying. There's credibility in your eyes that, Bailey is saying this, so it must be true, or this must be good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that, Hamza?
Yeah, and I totally get it. My mind, is just like pinging in so many different directions over here. Like I'm still actually just really upset about how irresponsibly some people, specifically politicians, are using social media. And it extends beyond them, right? Like think about some of the worst types of influencers that we've seen. Yeah, you'll have to come back to me. I need to get out of my own.
Yeah, no, totally.
This is something that I'm very I think very strongly about, because I think that for me, what it's done is it's actually torn apart the fabric of reality for me. When I got into social media, when I think back to how optimistic and naive I was, and wet behind the ears and green when I would attend these conferences back in 2006, 2007, marketing conferences where you would have thought leaders up on stage extolling the virtues of what social media was going to become. It's going to make a more open, connected, collaborative world. People, they described it like it was going to be like the future was going to be like the Jetsons, and it would be like that scene in The Matrix where you could just download information so quickly. It's like, whoa, I know Kung Fu. And there's going to be global peace. And I think I drank the Kool-Aid. And one of the frameworks that was given to me at that time was that social media is a public square. One person even said social media is a cocktail party. And the understanding was that everyone was in the same place. That all, let's assume there were just 100 users of social media at the time, all 100 were in the same room, and what you said, 99 other people heard. But as social media evolved and we had multiple opportunities to change the course and to sustain that momentum, and I think there was even one point where Facebook was exploring becoming a public utility and being owned by the government and owned by individuals, but they decided to sell out and just make their business model about advertising. When that happened and social media became fragmented, I've now started to formulate this idea that social media and the internet period was never, maybe at one point, very briefly, was a public square, but has now devolved into an overgrown dark forest of sorts. Consider this stat, okay? Only 10% of, so let me rephrase this over here. Less than 20% of North Americans have a Twitter account. Okay, just put that in perspective. Less than 20% of Americans have a Twitter account. Of that 20%, only 10% generate 80% of the content. The average Twitter user tweets maybe twice a month, but those 10% tweet up to 134 times a month. That's wild, because when you consider trending topics, when you look at how it's presented to you, you're like, whoa, this is what's really happening in the world. This is what's truly important.
Right.
But it's not. This is what's truly important to a small segment of the population who are active and probably have some commonalities among them. And it's frustrating because now the four of us in this room have very different trending topics, 4 different realities, 4 different conceptions of the world. And what I'm alarmed by is that, yes, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I get my news from a few sources, but I don't know what Dean is thinking in Sudbury. I don't know what Azim is thinking in Markham. I don't know what Dave is thinking in Australia. For all intents and purposes, these people could be part of newsletters or podcasts. They listen to podcasts. They're part of private Slack channels and communities.
Yeah.
Gab is another network where things are happening. Vote is another network where things are happening. We don't actually know just how big social media has become, how isolated and small it's become.
Right.
If and how people are aware of each other's existence, if they're talking to one another, it's a terrifying time for me personally, and I sometimes get in my own head.
So what do you two think about this? What if you had to prove your identity in order to have a profile?
Ooh, boy. That's what they asked at the World Youth Forum.
Whoa.
One guy botched it completely.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he was like, yeah, we definitely need to have an identity, and the crowd turned against him.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
I wonder.
Well, to an extent, they verify like your phone. If you create a social account.
No, I mean like
like
Airbnb, show your license,
Oh,
verify
wow.
your identity
Oh,
is who
wow.
you say that you are.
yeah.
Do you think that could be a precursor to maybe something terrifying at a government level? Will that enable things like thought crime? Will that enable policing for things that you've done in the past? 1984. Will Big Brother now creep in and be like, hey, Bailey, remember that one time you were homophobic back in 2006? Not saying that you were, but you might have had a DM where back in the day you might have just typed out a rap lyric or something. Because let's face it, back in the day, rap, very homophobic. And so it was not intentional what you were saying, but now the police can go back and be like, hey, I can connect Bailey, your personal account with that. This is your SIN number. This is your bank account. We're going to freeze your assets and you're no longer going to be eligible for a loan because back in the day.
I don't think that would happen. You still have to control
That's a
the
stretch, for
laws,
sure.
but let's pretend you did steal something and you put it online. Great. Like you shouldn't have done that. That was dumb.
No, it's
But
such an interesting
I
question.
haven't actually thought about this deep enough to have an opinion yet, which is why I'm asking you.
Well, let's put it frankly, right? I mean, maybe blink if this is true, but have you ever downloaded something illegally? Have you ever streamed something illegally? Right? Technically,
He blinked his
hey, no, the camera didn't catch me, right? But if you blinked in this room, you've committed a crime. Like, there's no other way to frame this. You can make all the arguments you want about how the digital ecosystem has prompted you to do that and forced your hand, but we committed a crime.
Okay, but I'm talking about use of, like, let's pretend, or the question was, let's pretend Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat said, in order to have a profile here, you need to verify your identity.
Right.
Like your identity, not...
I guess.
I see what you're saying.
Like,
I see what you're saying.
I would only be wary about how, like, sure, Airbnb does that, and their function is solely to make sure you're a real person that is going to rent a condo or apartment or whatever it is. But in the context of social media, I guess I would be worried about, like, why would you want to...
So people stop saying all of this crap that they wouldn't say to your face, so that they can actually put this to an identity, and that we don't have a bunch of floater eggs running around swaying elections.
Yeah.
I hear
true.
you. I hear you. There's
I feel
accountability for what you
there's
say,
accountability just like there is offline.
Yeah. Interesting. That's a thought.
Yeah.
I need to
course,
sit on it a bit
data
more.
protection would have to be very strong, and it would have to be regulated. I think it was Twitter that actually said was interested in becoming a public utility. Facebook's a little bit...
So Bailey and Priya, you've honed in on something so fascinating over here. Specifically, those on the right, more conservative-minded voters, have this obsession with, especially down south, with I think the Second Amendment is freedom of speech, or is it the First Amendment? I can't remember which one. But this idea of the freedom of speech, they value that above all things. And I'm like, hey man, I think you don't have the correct understanding of what freedom of speech is. Freedom of speech is not freedom from repercussion. It's not freedom from consequences.
From accountability.
But they're terrified. They're paranoid, and you have people like these just weirdos like Alex Jones that are just constantly in their ears, that are saying things like, first they're going to take away your freedom of speech, and next they're going to take away your guns, and then like they just paint this catastrophization.
You're ensuing hate.
Ensuing hate, but there's a catastrophization of what's going to happen once freedom of speech slips, at least their conception of it. And social media seems to be the proxy war for that. And talking about banning and censoring and canceling on social media seems to be a discussion about something bigger. It's not actually about that.
That's an awesome segue to my next question to you guys. And it's about the quality control piece, right? Like we talked about data privacy, this fake news, and who's regulating all of this. But I guess a thought, and I want to know what you guys think on this, is for these social media giants specifically, let's say Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok to some extent, right? Can they self-regulate and sort of have some sort of mechanism that's effective for quality control on the accuracy of information that is on their platforms? And how does that balance with this freedom of speech notion that anyone can say anything?
I'll keep my thoughts very concise on this one. I think they can regulate. I don't think they want to regulate because it is not in their business best interest to do so.
Right.
They have an obligation to their shareholders, to their investors. They have an obligation to the co-founders who want to become unicorns and tech billionaires and live out the rest of their lives on yachts, and more power to them. But maybe not, because what they're doing is that they are creating habits, and they're conditioning their audience to continue to use their platform without any regard for these conversations that we're having over here. I think that this conversation needs to be heard by them, but I don't think it will reach them. It's going to reach the people. Maybe it'll sway some people, maybe it'll reinforce some people and galvanize some people to do something, but the people who need to hear this are not listening to us, because I think there's a crisis of consciousness. They actually don't care. They don't have the moral compass that we have at this table.
I mean, I think that I don't have a lot of belief in capitalists to give away their money like they used to. I'm listening to the audiobook Sapiens still. And I'm at the point where he's talking about the evolution of capitalism since when it was first proposed by Adam Smith to what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was first proposed as was this belief, and trickle down eventually factors into it, but this belief that if you put money into private hands, that they would then hire people. Like that they would actually spend that money growing out their workforce, and invest it back into people.
Right.
And that is remarkably different today. That's really remarkably different. And the belief, this trickle down effect you always hear, is that if businesses make money, then that money is going to trickle down through wealth is going to trickle down to people.
Mm-hmm.
That's not happening either. It hasn't been happening for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, the especially, and how this connects to social media is that especially since the advent of online globalization, social media, all this stuff, even less so do you need to invest back into your local workforce. Even less so. I don't need to build a bridge anymore for you to come get my product.
Right.
I can sell it online to Singapore. I actually don't need anybody physically around me anymore to make a lot of money. And so you get these like tech billionaires making money online without that moral compass, perhaps, without that accountability to people. And I think, there's really no stopper. There's no trickle down.
Yeah.
There's none of that. They're actually based, like a lot of their corporate offices are based in Dublin because of low corporate tax rates. It's not like their taxes are coming back to
And
the
ain't that
countries.
some shit? What is the population of Dublin? Right. What is the population of Ireland? Maybe 12 mil?
It's called a tax haven country. And in this way,
Unfucking Sorry. I didn't mean to swear,
It's all
man.
good.
I'm like,
It's all good.
when Greta Thunberg, when you're ready to come over and help us with the social media fight, come on board, Greta. Like, I need somebody who can. I want to channel that anger right now. I just feel like her
No,
because it's
it is
bizarre.
frustrating. And in that way, I understand where some people are frustrated with companies and they want to say things like, get out of your tax haven countries and come back local. But I think it's going to be in the hands of governments and people to hold these companies accountable. Just to say, to do what the GDPR is starting to do and say, you're affecting our people. The money's not coming back. You're not building bridges. You're not contributing to education like corporate tax is, theoretically supposed to do.
Yeah.
Not okay.
So,
We
Billy,
need the governments to do this.
radical idea. Okay, is this possible, or have we passed the point of no return? Can the groundswell happen with the users? Can we decide that we're going to do this mass opt out? We're all going to delete our Facebook accounts on September 3rd.
No.
It's too late.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I do have faith
Shit.
in younger
I was
generations.
naive. I was naive. I thought
Yeah.
that maybe we could pull that off, but no, we
I
can't.
just don't think that will happen.
No, I know.
I can't delete
it
Instagram,
would-
man. I have too much fun. 6 Plus? How am I going to get my 6 Plus?
It's a drug.
Yeah, it
By
is a
every
drug. It is a drug.
By every measure, there's mass addiction.
Yeah.
Every measure. And and I think that I do have faith in younger generations, but I think even if you outlawed it tomorrow, even if you started charging for it tomorrow, that you would still have critical mass on there. But yet the young generations, they are more versed in this.
Yeah.
So they are more versed even in things like we're talking about, like safety, like when to and to not go online, because it's kind of a blessing and a curse right now for young people. Mostly a curse right now because there's not a lot of education, and they came online, especially teenagers. They're in this weird phase of life where you compare yourself as a means of understanding your identity. More so, it's the phase of life in terms of social psychological development where you go outside the home to compare yourself more with peers, peer-to-peer comparison.
Right.
And right now, in this particular time in history, parents and educators largely didn't grow up with social media. So they are, by every measure, addicted. I mean, like physiologically, the chemicals being released, the physical habitual elements of it, by every measure. Same reward pathways as every other drug. And at the same time, though, so that's their consequences from it.
Yeah.
It's really messing up mental well-being right now. And I think that there should be maybe more empathy for that.
Right.
But at the same time, the blessing for them is that they are more media literate and savvy than anybody else. For sure,
Yeah.
of course, right?
Yeah.
Well, this I think is a really good segue. Like speaking about young people, maybe we can like, sort of like, because I think we've spent a lot of time just in unpacking and unraveling the onion that is like what social media has become and the dark side of it. But maybe there's some light at the end of this, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna
funny.
tie
That's
this
perfect, yeah.
together into when you say the next generation, there's this whole new era of influencer marketing,
Yeah.
right? And for those who don't know what that is, loosely, it's the ability to reach audiences through affiliations with people with followings, right? Whether that's micro influencers, a couple of thousands, couple of 100,000s, or the Jenner Kardashian sort of clan in the hundreds of millions of followers, right? And I have 2 examples, and I want to wrap it up with your thoughts on this. There's I don't know if like people have heard about Ryan, who's a 7-year-old host of Ryan Toys Review, who's generated about 11 million in pre-tax income in 2017.
I'm sorry, Student Life Network. I'm quitting tomorrow.
He makes YouTube videos that reviews toys and like in the millions of dollars, right? And another example of how influencer marketing or the influencer generation has sort of led into business creation is Huda Katan, who's the founder and CEO of Huda Beauty. Who's dubbed as the Bill Gates of beauty influencers. Shout out to Huda. I love her. And she started on social media, was a professional makeup artist, and used her following to eventually grow a brand that's now valued at about $1 billion or more, right? And I guess my question and how to tie into like everything we've spoken about is there's a lot of freedom that comes with being able to monetize and build your own business off of your community that exists online, right? How do you see sort of this new generation of influencers and new generation of marketing and advertising affecting our relationship with community building and development on social media? Because there are a lot of things, like for example, and where this question is coming from is I watch a ton of YouTubers online across different sort of industries and backgrounds, and some of them have deals that with brands that end up trying to sell you stuff or trying to say that things are good, and some of them genuinely like certain things and want to share that with you. Is there going to be how do you differentiate, right, when you're being sold to versus a genuine, like you mentioned, Bailey, if there's a lot of weight in now influencers and their choices, right?
That's interesting.
But yeah, a lot of things said. I want to know your thoughts on like the whole influencer generation and the future of sort of marketing advertising.
Well, for you at SLN, you have millions of students, and brands partner with SLN to target these students.
Right.
Target sounds like a harsh word, but how do you decide?
I'm glad you asked.
What you're gonna put in front of them?
I feel very strongly about this as well. As you can tell, I feel very strongly about all things social media.
He's like riled up right now.
I know it is, because it does get really frustrating right now.
It's I'll tell you how frustrating it is. So I teach this course on social media at Ryerson. And about 2 years in, I was ready to quit. I was like, it is exhausting. I walk out of that class and I'm done. I feel like I need 2 days to recover.
Wow.
And it got especially bad. Like I think in my second year of teaching it, the Catch Me Outside girl popped out. Catch me outside. How about that? And then she's blown up, and I'm just like, there's no justice in the world. Like, this is permissible. Like this can happen online. Like I was born in the wrong era. But what got me back into the class though were the kids, the students. The students, to Bailey's point, were so savvy, so literate. And like I said before we got on air, like they can sniff the bullshit. And I think there's an overcorrection happening. And maybe I'm nostalgic. Maybe it's not true. Maybe this is verisimilitude. But I think we are going back to a time where authenticity is being prioritized. And we're starting to see signals. For example, you can't game SEO anymore. Once upon a time, people made millions and billions of dollars by what we call black hat tactics on SEO. Now Google has just basically said, you have to write something good. That's the only way that you're going to rank on the top of Google. Just write something valuable. Don't focus on headings. Don't focus on images and alt tags and all that. That's important. But just write something long and good. And I'm like, whoa, I mean, if Google is signaling that with written content, what's going to happen when it comes to video content? And you can see, for example, my dad follows an influencer on YouTube by the name of Mark Wiens, a travel blogger. I watched his videos. I'm like, damn, this is just good content. Like there's no tricks. There's no smoke and mirrors. It's just a guy with a camera traveling the world being like, hey, I'm here in Pakistan and I'm having street food and it's fantastic. And I'm like, wow, man, this is like human to human connection. When you were talking about, I can't remember that phrase that you used, Bailey, about your circles of influence, how it's easier to influence 3 people than it is to influence 300. What was that?
Yeah. Oh, the size of the group.
The size of the group.
Essentially, I can't remember the actual
term. It was
term for it.
But to Bailey's point, I'll keep this very succinct over here. I believe that the influencer bubble as we know it has burst, and it has given way to something beautiful. For instance, now at Student Life Network, we don't hire people who have large followings. That following is a metric that no longer matters. It is a vanity metric. You can have 100,000 followers, doesn't matter. Show me engagement. Let me see that post and let me see the quality of your interaction with real people over there. And so we actually focus on smaller and smaller followings. The smaller and the more avid the following, the better it is for us.
I guess the more in-depth your like engagement levels are, right?
Exactly. The
The
strength of the connections. And you can only have strong connections when I think you're not faking it. Because you can't...
When you're genuine.
When you're genuine.
People buy into you,
100%.
who you are.
And this generation, I'm optimistic that they will see right through the marketers and the brands and the BS. And
They do.
It makes me scared as a marketer, but it also fills me with motivation to change the way and unlearn the things that used to be tricks and now focus on actually providing value.
Yeah,
Love
there's
that.
definitely like young folks, or I was actually interviewing influencers at one point for this project I was working on. And it's kind of seems like a dirty thing in the community if you have ads for things you don't actually like. So that's a good sign in my opinion, I guess, which is that it's seen as dirty and wrong to be just in it for the money. You have to actually believe in this stuff.
Right.
So obviously not everybody's following that. And there's also the other element, which is also true at the very other side of what I'm saying, where people are faking ads.
Yep.
Because they want to be seen as cool enough to get a brand sponsorship.
For sure. I know for a fact Centrum did not sponsor you, but you put hashtag ad over there.
Oh my God.
No, not you. There's one person I follow who was advertising Centrum, and I'm like, come on, man, just don't at least try harder, man. Pick a better brand.
Maybe Centrum did.
Oh, man,
I feel like you
Centrum ain't
wouldn't
advertising
choose
on
that
Instagram,
one
man.
unless they were like
Savage. Savagery.
Maybe she didn't think that nobody would check her on that. I looked it up. Centrum is not running Instagram ads. I have a friend who works for the agency. Anyways, that's a different story, man.
Why would somebody choose Centrum as their
Of
big
all
ad,
brands
I
that
know, that's
exist
what I'm
out there.
saying, man.
Oh God.
Do Fashion Nova,
Then
do
again,
Nike, do
oh,
Adidas,
gosh.
man, but Centrum.
That's
Hey,
hilarious.
for what it's worth, man, I take my
ad.
2-a-day gummies, so I love Centrum.
sick ad.
Hashtag ad sick.
This is not sponsored. This is
show it
not.
to you.
Oh yeah, I know. Right, people are gonna.
We just
Don't
lost
worry, it's
Centrum as a
really
client. I'm
not.
sorry, guys. Yeah.
It's all
Anyways,
good.
I think I hope that the influencers though, if you have someone saying to you, "This is really me. This is what I really like,"
Yeah.
you're even more likely to be influenced. So you have to, I think, always maintain a healthy level of what he might call cynicism, what I might call skepticism, and honestly, just media literacy.
Yeah.
That these people, if you make money doing this, there's another element you just got to consider in these interactions that you're having with people.
And that onus is on the user.
Yeah, well, I think the onus is on both sides.
Right.
I think that's kind of, imagine I was selling you these cups. If I sold you dirty cups or, if I was taking advantage of my customers, we wouldn't like that shopkeeper kind of deal.
Yeah.
And in a way, these influencers, they're the new shopkeepers because they're selling you stuff.
Yeah.
And
that makes
I think
sense.
they need to put their identity behind it. And that's where I'm kind of glad that it's seen as a dirty thing to not like it. But at the same time, there's also with power comes responsibility. And it's not just do you like it, it's who is following you and what kind of responsibility do you have to people, and especially young people out there. Like there was this huge thing that was going on with like skinny teas.
Yeah.
And I think the Kardashians
detox tea?
they ended up
Yeah.
apologizing for their first early versions of it. Kim Kardashian ended up apologizing, I think, for the early versions of the skinny tea. Because there's a difference between get thin tea and detoxify your liver.
Yeah. Teas is.
But the ones that were being promoted as, like, I think it was literally called like skinny tea or something
skinny
like that.
me tea or something. Yeah.
And
I remember seeing those.
And they had a million influencers. And I think that what you started to see, that was probably, I want to say, biggest 3-4 years ago. And in the last few years, you've seen body positivity movement.
Yeah.
And so now, we often talk about this, could be a whole other podcast, but the body image, the whatever it might be, the moral of the day, as tied with social currency. It's almost like there's a capitalization.
I wouldn't even say glamorization, but maybe
What's
a
the word that we use?
normalization.
No, you know how we sometimes say I'm even sometimes weary, though I'm more accepting of it than skinny tea, is are you leaning into conversations about this or that social issue for social currency?
Oh, virtue signaling.
Oh.
Virtue signaling.
Yeah,
Okay, I
Virtue
see what you
signaling
mean.
and the fact that it actually does come with social currency now. Actually comes with real currency now.
Yeah.
So I'm weary of that as well, because we're constantly trying to make sure that we're seeing all sides. We're probably failing, but I think that the 2016 election woke up a lot of people down south. And one of the things that woke up for I know, especially for Hamza and for me as well, was that we're all in a filter bubble. And there's a bunch of other people out there that are thinking differently. And guess what? We have to care because they vote. So
Well,
makes sense.
I know that there's
What
some
time
folks
is
going
it?
to come.
Yeah, I know. I was
Do
just
we
going
wanna
to
end
reel it
there? Should
in.
we bring it up?
I just want to say, like, thank you for this opportunity, because I think I'm walking away from this genuinely as I came in as a cynic, but I'm leaving as a skeptic. So I think that this was a very healthy conversation.
well, we should
Progress.
we should finish making people feel positive.
Yeah, no, I was
too.
just going to tie it all together and say, if you have any, like, if you had one thing or a thought that you could leave anyone listening or watching with, like, what would your last thought wrapping up be?
I would say that if social media is a risky behavior, just like sex, drugs, or alcohol, then we need to make sure that we're spreading awareness and share the TED Talk, obviously, because that's the whole point of it, awareness. And moderate your consumption. If you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling down, if you haven't gone to the gym and that's messing with you, that is not when you start drinking. That's not when you start drugs. Make sure that you're good in your offline self before you get online.
And my thing would be, just think about where we're going and how the actions that you're performing today and the things that you are subscribing to, the media diet that you're consuming, just ask yourself, is this the extrapolation leading us towards a enabling autonomy or disabling autocracy? Because these futures have already been imagined by some of the great science fiction and dystopian writers of our time. We know how this is going to end. Every technological development that exists today, we've seen it to the nth degree. So stay woke.
Stay woke. I like that. Where can everyone find you on social media?
Oh yeah, I know. Hopefully we're the good side of social media, but I'm at Bailey Parnell and everything. Yeah,
and you have
Bailey
research that's #SafeSocial.
Yeah, and if you are into this kind of stuff, you can go on #SafeSocial, and I may or may not be making that its own organization this year because it's just taking up way too much of my capacity, and we need to have these conversations.
There we go. And I'm at Hamza K on Instagram, at Hamza K on Twitter. I'm Hamza Khan on LinkedIn, and my website is hamzakhan.ca.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
This is a good time.
Yeah, follow us. Follow Our Wave Hub on Insta. My name's Priya. Thank you. Shout out to Revive Films for always being super patient with recording and producing our podcast. And yeah, thank you too. I admire you guys and your careers, and thank you for making your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. See you on the next one.
See ya.